Hey everyone, and welcome to today's session on working in Google Slides. We are so glad you're here, and before we get started, there are just a few housekeeping items. You will notice the bit.ly at the bottom of this slide, bit.ly/path2gc1. This is a case-sensitive link, but you would need to write this down or go ahead and open this up in a new tab and add this slide deck to your own Google Drive. These are the resources that I will be leading from today. Just so you know, this entire document that you see can be used if you are on the path to Google certification. It can also be used if you are only here today to learn about working with Google Slides. So glad you guys are all here. Today we will be working from slide number 8. Yesterday's session on Google Slides covered the basics, such as how to add a text box, shapes, images, how to set those up, and how to share slide decks with other teachers and with your students. So today we will be taking those skills and creating engaging activities, as well as all kinds of other ebooks, e-textbooks, and lessons that you can share with your students. Just as a reminder, as with all of these other slides, if you forget something, come back to this slide and you can click on any of these topics and it will lead you to step-by-step directions on how to complete that step. For example, if you forget how to create a hyperlink, you can click on this link and it will now open up the step-by-step directions. Also worth noting, at the bottom of this slide today, in the presenter notes, I have hyperlinked all kinds of different examples. So all of these examples I will be using today to demonstrate some of our skills. So you are welcome to open any of these up and make your own copy to use these as teaching activities, or you can use them as inspiration for creating your own lessons. If you have any questions, please use the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner, and I will be answering those during our session. So I've just created a plain basic slide deck here to lead us through some of these topics for today. The first one I would like to show you is how to create the linked text. Let's say that I wanted to share a web article with my students. Maybe I wanted them to go to this website, nationalgeographic.com, for kids. Well, it's kind of a long URL, and if I just paste that on a slide, it gets a little confusing. It's a lot for kids to see. They're like, do I click on this? Do I type it in the address bar? I'm really not sure. So we can clean this up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is add my own text. And I'm going to hold left click, hold down to select the words, and click the hyperlink icon. And I'm going to paste or type that link in. So you'll notice that the words now become the link to the website. This is much easier for kids to grasp than a long URL. I can do the same exact thing with images. Let's say that I wanted to add an image on my page. I can make this image become a hyperlink as well. Again, I would click on this to activate it and click on my little link icon and either type or paste that URL into that image. So now when students click on the image, same thing, it becomes a hyperlink that will now open up that specific website. So I did this by using the link inside of the toolbar. You can also hyperlink by clicking Insert and Link, or you can select and right-click and also find the link option here. So there are 3 different ways to add the hyperlink. You can also hyperlink between slides. Let's say I wanted to ask my students a question, maybe which animal that you would like to learn more about today. So I can even use Google Slides to create kind of a choose your own adventure story. Let's say that I created a new slide down here to include information about penguins, and maybe I had another slide that told about tigers. And I wanted my students to come in and say, which animal would you like to learn more about today? So they could choose tigers. If they click here, it would go to another website about tigers. Or maybe now I want to add a link to the penguin, and instead of pasting in a link, notice I have the ability to link to a slide in this presentation. So if I click this drop down arrow, it will actually let me pick which slide I would like that to go to. So now when students come in and click, it will now take them to that specific slide, and I should have linked it to slide number 9. So you can link either text or images on a page. Another thing I can do with Google Slides is insert videos from either my Google Drive or from YouTube, and this is a safe experience. What scares you about showing YouTube videos to your students? That's right. I'm seeing as you type very quickly, you're typing all of those advertisements, all of those pop-ups, all those suggested videos at the end. Those scare me too. So I do like to insert videos inside of a Google slide deck. So let's say that for this example, I might want to show my students a YouTube video about penguins. So if I go to YouTube and I find it, and I want to make sure before I show my students any video that I watch it in its entirety. That means every single second of it. Also, make sure you check underneath, and I can tell that this video has already been approved. Sometimes you might see in this blue bar a note that says video has not been approved. So after you have watched the entire video and you deem it safe for all Fayette County students, you can approve that video. Okay, so I already have watched this entire video. So I'm going to copy the URL and go back to my Google slide deck. Now I'm going to click on Insert and Video. Notice I have the ability here, I could actually search for videos about penguins and then watch them all the way through. So I could go through and pick one of these, or I can paste in the link that I have previously found. Note you could also have added a YouTube video from your Google Drive here as well. Okay, so now that I've searched for that video, and that is indeed it, I will click Select, and it embeds the video right onto my page. I can either, I have the ability to resize this, drag it, and drop it wherever I want. This video is like 19 minutes long, so maybe I don't want my students to have to watch all 19 minutes of it. So what I can do is click the video one time, and notice in my menu bar I now get the Format Options tab. Well, if I click that, my format options are on the side, and right now I'm going to look under Video Playback. I can choose at what point I want this video to start, and at one point I would like for this video to end. That's a great feature. So now when my students come in and click to watch the video, it will only show from 15 seconds to a minute. You also have the option to choose if you want this to autoplay or if you want to mute the audio. I saw a great example of this yesterday with a science teacher who was teaching the water cycle. The video he found was very complex in its terminology, and it had music that was really loud and hard to hear the speaker. So he actually muted the audio, and he used Screencastify to record himself speaking over the video in the background. So that's a great usage of muting the audio. I do want to show you one other example. I know a lot of teachers, I know you might have heard of Edpuzzle, maybe even attended one of our trainings on it. Edpuzzle is a great tool to be able to send a video to your students and add stopping points along the way where students can answer a multiple choice question. Sometimes it's hard for students to log into that, or maybe you want something more than just answering a multiple choice question. So I've created this quick little activity of the hungry caterpillar. On slide number 2 is the video, and this entire video is 20 minutes long. And I know that my kindergarten students that I wanted to watch this would not probably sit still for 20 minutes, or maybe they couldn't retain all of that information. So I clicked on the video one time and hit Format Options. And you'll notice I chose for the video to start at 0 but end at 2 minutes and 5 seconds. So they're going to watch the beginning, then they go to the next slide. And I just created a quick little drag and drop activity. What did the hungry caterpillar eat on Monday? So they just watched that section and they're giving me immediate feedback. You can also teach your students how to use this little scribble tool, and then they can come in and now draw their own items. Maybe it's a banana. So they can either draw or drag and drop or type. And then they go to the next slide. And when I click on the format options, you can see I have this video start where they left off. So they start at minute 2:05 and it ends at 2:40. So they're only going to watch another 35 seconds. Click on the next slide. And again, just another quick little activity where they could either pick what they wanted to drag up and drop, or they could either write and scribble or type. So this continues, I could continue this to the end of the video. Again, all of these examples are linked back on your Path to Google Certification notebook. Okay. Another thing that I need to think about when creating activities is the page design. For example, I could come into File, Page Setup, and I can change what this is going to look like. By default, Google Slides are in presentation mode. They're usually a wide screen, like a rectangle, but I can change that. Maybe I now want this to be 8.5 by 11. And I can apply, and now my presentation looks like a book. When I go into presentation mode, it now is a book. It's a digital, it's an ebook. I could even flip through the pages. What a great way to let your students take their writing to a whole new level. Rather than letting their work live on a piece of paper crammed in a notebook or a folder, they can actually turn it into a digital book and share this with their classmates, or you could share it on your classroom blog, post it out so that parents and family members can see it. So your students have now become a published author, and they're going to take a lot more ownership into their work. So again, I just went to File, Page Setup, and I changed the way that that was going to look. Some other things that you can do with the page design is you can change the color of your background. Maybe you want to go to background and make this green. And I have some elements on top, so I won't see my full screen being green yet. Another thing that I could do is I could insert a table onto this page. Tables are powerful. I use these a lot for organizing information. So anytime you want to insert something, such as a text box or a video or a shape or a chart or a diagram or a word art, you come to Insert, and now I'm going to try out Table. I'm going to make mine a 2 by 3. So maybe I want to set up a lesson for my students, and I want them to, I want to have a lesson hook, and then I want them to practice something, and then I want to do an assessment. So let's take some of those elements that we learned earlier and put them together to create this lesson. So maybe for the hook, I want them to watch a video about penguins. So I could actually put that video inside of my table where they could watch it. And then maybe I want them to practice. So maybe I want them to go to Flipgrid and tell me about what you learned. And then I want to go to Flipgrid, and I could insert a hyperlink onto this page. And I'm not going to take the time right now to go find an exact Flipgrid code. We'll just make that go to Flipgrid for now. But if you linked that to your actual Flipgrid class, to the topic you want them to tell you about, you can link it directly here. And then maybe for assessment, they need to answer this Google form. So I've now set up an entire lesson within this one Google slide. So this is a great way to package your lesson and hand it out to your students. A quick example of this is the best years slide deck that I've shared. And you can tell that who has created this. The credits are down in the presenter's note. So she just created a slide deck. She inserted a picture on slide 1 to make it visually appealing. On slide 2, you can see she has a video, so the students can watch this, and then they're going to use what they have watched to do tasks on the upcoming pages. On the next slide, I can see she changed her background color as well as inserted the table that we were just talking about. So instead of just giving your students a static worksheet, instead of just uploading a PDF and making them download it or print it or recopy it on paper, you can take that worksheet and make it come to life. So I still have my questions here. I still have a place for my students to answer, but I'm adding some different capabilities. I'm giving them access to up-to-date information through video or through other websites. Even adding these little fun animated GIFs or images can bring your work to life and make it more interesting to your students. This teacher also created little drag and drop activities. So again, I know this looks pretty fancy, but she has done everything we just talked about. She took a slide, she added changed the color of the background, she inserted a table, she just created these little images, and students can now drag and drop them where they belong. So just taking up all of those basic skills and mixing them up. I mentioned earlier about the teacher who was teaching the water cycle. And so a common question we are getting a lot of right now is, how do I turn this PDF into a worksheet? And then again, there's problems with that. Students are having to print or download, and they're calling their teachers in tears, or they're bugging their parents who are pulling their hair out. You can take that a step further. You can embed that image into a Google slide. So the teacher, I had him take a screenshot of his water cycle graphic and come into background. We've already learned how you can change the color of the background, but you could also insert this as an image. So I saved the water cycle image to my desktop. Here it is, and I'm going to now add that as my background. And when I've added it, notice that the students cannot click and move anything around. It didn't change any of my other slides, but it made the background of this specific slide that image. I've seen teachers do this for labeling the bones in the body. Maybe it was the part of a flower. Maybe it was vocabulary words that you wanted them to put into alphabetical order. And then I have a couple of different options for how students can write on top. For example, I could add a text box. And then I could even say type here. Make sure you put something in the text box, otherwise it disappears. If you don't want the text box to disappear, a little trick is, once you have it selected, you can come up to your format panel, and I can change the weight of that box so I can make it bigger so that it stands out. I can also even choose the line color that I want. And so now it's pretty evident that my students need to come in and type here. Another option, one of my favorite things to do when creating activities, is to insert a shape. And you can choose any shape. I'm going to do this little rounded rectangle. And I like shapes because you can automatically type in them. You can even come up to the little bucket and fill this with a different color so that it stands out on the page. So I could then copy this and paste in a new box, and maybe I want to change this one. Okay, so I've now created another drag and drop activity where students could come in and have to put in these boxes where they belong. So just another drag and drop activity. So let's look at a few other examples. This one is just a fast fact family activity. You can tell this is an example of a hyperdoc, and we learned about this with Google Docs last week, but you can do the same thing with Google Slides. So I can tell on slide 2, she created an explore feature so the students can be engaged automatically. They can watch these 2 little videos that are really fun and colorful that will grab their attention, yet teach the concept of what they're going to be doing today. Then there's an explain slide where they can come in and type what the answer is. And then there are drag and drop activities. So the teacher just included these numbers in their own little box. It looks like she used word art to complete these. And then now the students can drag and drop numbers into the lines. Oh, I'm seeing a question. Well, how did that magically appear after you drag it away? So kind of like we used to do on our smart boards, our smart notebook, this is infinite cloning, and you kind of have to do it manually. So when I select it once and copy it, and then I paste it, I can paste a whole bunch of them, and then you can just drag and drop them on top of each other, or I could select them all, come to arrange, and I can align them. And I always have to play around with this to get it right. And I didn't select the top one, but then you can just drag and drop them so they look like they're on top of each other. A fun little trick. So that's one example of an interactive activity. Another one, and actually before I get to that one, let's talk about this one for a second. So the 2 examples I've shown you so far, actually the 3 examples, are Hungry Caterpillar example with the videos, our 1950s video with including videos and tables and spaces for text, and even this number fact family one where they can drag and drop, are all examples that when I've shared with students, I would give them their own copy. And I would do that so that they could then open them up and each have their own copy to work on. There are a couple of different ways you can give students their own copy. You can do this automatically in Canvas, or if you're using Google Classroom, and it's really important that you do this when you set it up. And I'm going to just add my slide deck. Remember, it usually things come up as recent documents, or you can do a search within your drive. So I'm going to add that fact family hyperdoc. And notice that it says students can view, meaning they can only see it. I have the ability to say students can all edit the one file, or I could pass out a copy for each student. And that's the way I would recommend sharing activities like this if you are using Google Classroom. That way, you're not going to have 100 kids sharing things to your email and to your Google Drive. It would keep all of these activities in one place inside Google Drive. Or inside Google Classroom, sorry. Okay, so we'll come back to that. So those are just building interactive activities. So there are other ways we can use Google Slides. Instead of just letting kids work individually, you can allow them to work together, to collaborate. So in Classroom, instead of saying each student had their own copy, I would say students can edit the file, meaning they can all work together. Don't let that scare you. It's actually a very fun activity. Let's take a look at this classifying animals one. On slide 1, I have just a reference about the different types of animals. And then I would say, Amy, go to slide 2, Adam, go to slide 3, Bobby, go to slide 4, and I would give each student a slide to work on. You can even have them add their name up here. And then they can now drag and drop the animals where they belong. So rather than looking at 24 different slide decks, now I can look at one and see all of my classwork. Are they going to delete each other's? Are they going to jump on each other's slide? Yes, they will. It's human nature. It's going to accidentally happen a couple of times. But take the time to teach them, because these collaborative activities can be very powerful. Let's look at another example. I just created this slide deck using 3rd grade vocabulary words. And when I started it, it looked a lot like this. I just put one vocabulary word on each page. And I gave my students the direction, please jump on your assigned slide and use that word in a sentence to show you understand what it means. Some teachers actually have them write a definition and use the word in a sentence. That's fine. And then I also had them to add an image that goes along with the meaning of that word that shows context. And so, you know, this is great. I saw my daughter's activity the other day. She had to define 30 vocabulary words, and it was pulling teeth to get her to do that. And so this is kind of another fun activity because my other daughter was using this in her U.S. history class, and each student had to do 3 of the definitions. And then when they were finished, and in order to study for the test, they could just flip through and read all of the other definitions. You can take this a step further, and you could have students add feedback to each other. So this was just a practice activity I did with teachers, but teach your students how to leave meaningful feedback. They could come to the new button and they could say, I like the way you used this in a sentence, but maybe you could try, and then we could, you know, push each other a little bit. Encourage your students to help encourage their peers to give a deeper meaning or deeper understanding. So just another quick way that you can use these collaborative experiences. I have seen other teachers use this where they maybe gave their students choice in how they were going to complete a vocabulary activity. So the students, some maybe went to Flipgrid, some maybe went to Padlet and other sources, and then they would come back and post their work here in one place. And then that way you're creating a virtual gallery of work. Another art teacher used this. She had her students creating found art at home. So they had to take a walk in their backyard and draw something they saw. And then they came in and each student posted their image of their work on a different slide. So it was a virtual art gallery. So many fun ways to have collaborative activities. The last thing I wanted to share with you today was about utilizing the master slide, and I saw this come up in the question box as well. How do I put text back there or images on a slide and students not be able to manipulate them? So we already looked at one example of doing this with the water cycle, where you could include your whole picture as the background, but you can do this with the master slide as well. Let's say you wanted to set up your chart maybe, and you wanted your students to put things into this chart but not be able to move anything around that's in the background. So I could actually take a screenshot of this. So I'm going to go down and use my little snipping tool in the window on a Windows machine. You'll find that under accessories. It's called the snipping tool, and I can take an image of my slide, take a quick picture of my slide, and I'm going to save this to my desktop so I can come back and find it in a minute. Okay, so now back on my slide deck, I'm going to click on View and Master to go to the master slides. So this is how you set up templates and set up different themes. Let's say I wanted on every pink slide in my presentation, I wanted there to be a star. Oh, let's just go with penguin since I already have that pulled up. And then I also might want to put a text box on every one of these that says your name. Okay, so now when I exit this out, you can even look on any pink slide I've already added, that's here. I can't move the penguin because it's in my master slide. I can't move name because it's in my master slide. So when you put elements onto a master slide, they become part of the background. I can even do the same thing with that slide I did a second ago. If I wanted to go into the master slide, and now maybe I want any green slide to have the image that I did of my slide. So it's now here, and when I exit out, any of those green slides now look like that. See, I can't move anything. It becomes part of that page now. And then also, when I'm ready to add a new slide, remember there's the drop-down arrow, and you can choose which one of those slides you want, which one of the slides from that theme, and there's the activity I just created. So if I was doing a whole class of these, I could even duplicate it. Right click to duplicate it so that I have a lot of slides where my students could come in and work. Okay. So just as something fun today, talking about those slide themes, I would like to leave you with this, that there are two great sites that you can go to find templates. One of them is Slidesmania and the other is SlidesGo. And this is not part of our Google Path certification, but it's just something fun that teachers seem to like. Well, I like it as well. Notice there are different themes you could choose from. I usually jump into the education ones, but the fun ones are super exciting too. So you can come in and find all of these themes that have been created. And then once you choose one, let's say I wanted to use this cute one with the unicorn, I would open it up. And if I scroll down, it will even show me what all the different pages look like. And then you can either download as a PowerPoint template or a Google slide. And if you want to use it and add it to your own drive, you just click on Choose Template. And then this slide theme is yours to edit and share and create your own work using the theme. Okay, so that takes us to the end. Remember that all of the slides that we have used today, or all of the skills for slides, are here and broken down step by step. If you just click on the topic, it will take you to step-by-step directions. Okay, I see a question on how to share Google Slides with your students if you are not using Classroom or Canvas. That's a great question. So there are a couple of different ways that you can share slides. I can open up a slide deck and click Share. And then notice at the top with my link sharing on, I'm going to get the shareable link, and I can choose, by default, it's that anyone at Fayette County Public Schools can. And I can choose, do I want them all to be able to edit that same document? So you would use this choice in if you were doing a collaborative experience like the classifying animal ones or those vocabulary examples. You can also say anybody could only make comments from Fayette County, or if you only want them to view. And then once I click off of that, I can now copy this link and share it with my students through either email or Remind or any other way that you're sharing information with your students. So that's one way. If you're doing that, they would have to share it back with you in order for you to see their work. So please keep that in mind. Another way I could share with my students so that they each have their own copy is if you look at the URL or the address bar or the Omnibox, as that you need to know for your certification, you will notice that all of these end with edit. So there's a / with the word edit. So if you will select from the / beginning with edit and delete that, and then type in the words copy and hit enter, you will get this view. And so now when I copy and share this new link, so I could copy this and then maybe paste it in an email or send it out in any other method, students are forced to come in and make a copy, and it now opens up their own copy of that document. So those are just a couple of other extra ways that you can share Google Slides or Google Docs with your students. Please make sure that you have written down this link, bit.ly/path2gc, so that you have all of these resources. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks for joining.